Hey, and we are back, and we are going to, um, we are on Lesson 2, Chapter 1, Guided Reading Part 3. This is the last part of this chapter, of Chapter 1, and this guided reading Part 3 is going over Cancer Alley, which is, it's a nickname for a place in Louisiana where there has been a whole bunch of like refineries and industrial pollution going on. And then, like we touched on in the last one, it kind of, I'm sorry, I'm putting your footnotes down here so that you have them. Yes. Yes. Okay. So, you have your footnotes in this, and I'm going to go ahead and start. It'll probably take us a little... Oh, and actually, I'm also going to add a picture from the book. I took a picture with my phone. So, let me see. How do I... Oh, no. Can I add a picture? I don't know. I guess I can't right now. Let me see. Nope, can't add the picture. So I will, nope, can't add the picture there either. Nope, all I can do is comment. I'll add the picture later. Okay, we are on, Lesson 2, Chapter 1, Guided Reading Part 3 of Toxic Communities by Dorceta E. Taylor. The vocabulary is on my blog. The vocabulary includes all of Chapter 1. Cancer Alley. Though events like Triana and Warren County took center stage in the late 1970s and early 1980s, during that time, rural communities in Louisiana were trying to cope with an onslaught of industrial hazards that eventually garnered international attention. A 1978 Washington Post article used the term Cancer Alley to describe a heavily industrialized corridor where cancer occurred in higher frequencies among the population. But the article was not describing southeastern Louisiana. It was referring to the northeastern New Jersey, Washington Post 1978. For the next 9 years, communities such as Rutherford and Newark lived with the ominous-sounding moniker. Then, in 1987, the Washington Post published another article in which a tiny community of St. Gabriel, Louisiana, called Jacobs Drive, a street in the hamlet, Cancer Alley, because there was 15 cancer victims in a 2-block stretch. Half a mile away, there were 7 cancer victims living in 1 block. The meandering stretch of Mississippi River from Baton Rouge to New Orleans used to be known as Petrochemical Corridor, but since reports of the numerous cancer cases occurring in the small rural communities on both sides of the river surfaced, the entire area has become known as Cancer Alley. There are about 135 petrochemical plants in Cancer Alley. Cancer Alley includes the parishes or counties of, I'm going to get some of these wrong. I don't know how to say some of these, but I'm going to try. St. James, Ascension, Ascension, East Baton Rouge, West Baton Rouge, Iberville, St. John the Baptist, St. Charles, Jefferson, Orleans, Plaquemines, and Assumption. Well, I guess I got those okay. Let's see. Cancer Alley has hundreds of industrial facilities that include oil refineries, chemical manufacturing facilities, and solid waste dumps. A 2002 study found that Louisiana had the second highest cancer death rate in the country. Cancer rates. The most recent cancer data in Louisiana has the second highest male cancer rate in the country, trailing only Mississippi. While the national average for male cancers in 2008 was 532.6 per 100,000. Louisiana's rate is 609.6 per 100,000. The state ranks 12th overall for male and female cancers combined. The national combined male and female cancer rate is 462.1 per 100,000, while the rate is 490.4 per 100,000 in Louisiana. Louisiana has the third highest male cancer death rate in the country. In 2008, the male cancer death rate was 261.1 per 100,000 at the time. The average U.S. male cancer death rate was 215.7. Louisiana has the fourth highest female cancer death rate in the United States, while the average U.S. female cancer death rate was 148.4 per 100,000. In 2008, it was 163.4 per 100,000 in Louisiana. Louisiana has the second highest combined male and female cancer death rate. The combined cancer death rate is 203 per 100,000. In Louisiana, in comparison with national average, is 175.8 per 100,000. Cancer is the second leading cause of death in the United States, causing 1 in 4 deaths in the country. A study of cancer deaths rates from 1999 to 2008 show that blacks are more likely to die from cancer than any other racial group is. In 2008, the death rate from all cancers was 472.3 per 100,000 for blacks, 460.5 per 100,000 for whites, 358 per 100,000 for Hispanics, 294.8 per 100,000 for Asian and Pacific Islanders, and 270.4 per 100,000 for Native Americans. The Shell Oil Company, which has facilities in Cancer Alley, conducts its own research on mortality and cancer rates in Cancer Alley. The study, published in 2004, concluded that overall cancer and mortality rates for white males in Cancer Alley was significantly lower than rates for the corresponding Louisiana population. The study also argued that the incidence of lung cancer in Cancer Alley were similar to or lower than rates found elsewhere in Louisiana. White females in Cancer Alley had a similar mortality patterns to white males. The mortality rates of non-white males and females in Cancer Alley were similar to corresponding populations elsewhere in the state. The study conceded that cancer rates were higher in Louisiana than the average for the U.S. as a whole. Another Shell-sponsored study compared the incidence of cancer among employees at 2 petrochemical plants in southern Louisiana and the general population of that of the state. This study concluded that there was little evidence to indicate that there was any association between the incidence of cancer and employment at the 2 petrochemical facilities. Though the study found an increased risk of bone cancer, the researchers concluded that the bone cancer is unlikely to be due to occupational exposure. Toxic releases. Public concern over exposure to hazardous compounds and materials is warranted, though the overall on and off site releases and disposal of toxic chemicals and hazardous waste have been declining, dropping by 30% between 2001 and 2010. There is still cause for concern. In 2010, the 20,000 facilities across the country that filed Toxic Release Inventory (TRI) information with the EPA reported releasing or disposing of 3.9 billion pounds of toxic chemicals in the air, in the water, and on land, and through underground injection. These facilities also generated 21.8 billion pounds of production-related wastes. Concern about toxic chemicals and the hazardous waste is high in Louisiana because a large number of industrial facilities are located in the state. Many of these cluster along waterways such as the Mississippi River. The highest concentration of these facilities is found along Cancer Alley. The older facilities are much more egregious polluters than newer ones are. In 2011, Louisiana's 361 tri-facilities reported releasing or disposing of 122.2 million pounds of toxic chemicals and hazardous wastes on-site and 8.6 million pounds off-site. These facilities also manage 2.4 billion pounds of production-related wastes. The 11 parishes in Cancer Alley account for 63.5% of the on- and off-site releases and disposals of toxic chemicals and hazardous materials in Louisiana. The parishes also account for 46.4% of the toxic chemicals found in the production-related waste management in the state. And that will be Table 1.1. This is what it looks like, and it'll be on the blog. Okay? Table 1.1. The population of many of the small towns in Cancer Alley is primarily black and low income. Despite the large number of industrial facilities, unemployment is high in many communities, and most residents do not have a college education. In Geismar and St. Gabriel alone, Geismar, Geismar, there are 18 industrial facilities in a 9.5 square mile area. Industrial accidents and accidental releases are common occurrences in Cancer Alley. For instance, in 1994, Conda Vista, Conoco, located in Lake Charles, reported 39 chemical accidents that released 1,295,000 pounds of chemicals. The following year, Conda Vista reported 90 accidental chemical releases. In 1997, the company was charged with contaminating local groundwater supplies with between 19 and 47 million pounds of EDC, ethylene dichloride, a suspected human carcinogen. In 1999, hundreds of unskilled laborers filed suit against Conda Vista, claiming that they were exposed to EDC while cleaning up a spill from a leaking underground pipeline that carried the chemical inland from barges to Conoco's docks. On Christmas Eve, 1997, 500,000 gallon storage tank at Boarding Chemicals and Plastics in Ascension Parish blew up. The explosion was heard for miles away, forcing the closure of Route 1, the only entry and egress route for several communities, and the evacuation of residents. Exposure to pollution is high on the agenda of Louisiana's municipalities and parishes. A survey conducted by the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality's LDEQ found that local ordinance, water quality, and solid wastes were the top issue of concerns for municipalities and parishes. More than 60% of them listed these as the top concerns. This is not surprising since the report indicates that more than 75% of the state's 480 regulatory water bodies are listed as impaired. Most of the 11 parishes that did not meet the EPA standards for ozone were Cancer Alley. Opposition to sitting and operation of facilities. Alson, landfills and hazardous waste at the northern gate. Though Tryon and Warden County received much publicity, residents in Alson began the fight for environmental justice earlier than either the aforementioned communities. Alson, an unincorporated village north of Baton Rouge, is the northern gateway to Cancer Alley. It is a small community of about 1,000 residents, 98.9% of whom are black. 98.9% are black. Most of Alson residents own their homes, and 77.4% are owner-occupied. 19.4% of the residents are below the poverty level. In 1970, Rollins constructed what was at the time the fourth largest hazardous waste landfill in the United States. In Alson, the facility also had an incinerator. Longtime residents and the leader of the Coalition for Community Action, Mary McCassell, began to organize the community in 1976. In a 1988 interview, the 72-year-old grandmother claimed that residents had no warning that Rollins was a sitting facility, and that once it was constructed, people did not know what was going to be dumped there. The Rollins facility was cited for violating federal and state environmental laws 100 times between 1980 and 1985. Other industrial facilities can be found in Alson. These include plastic plants, lead smelters, landfills, tank car washers, petroleum coke yards, and resin makers. These are two Superfund sites in the community also. There are two Superfund community sites in the community also. In late 1980, residents stepped up efforts to organize and reduce their contamination of their community. They founded the North Baton Rouge Environmental Association to oppose two landfills that were proposed for their community. In 1981, some community residents filed a $3 billion class action lawsuit against Rollins, and in 1987 reached a settlement with the company for a lot less. The litigants received between $500 and $3,000, and for that they gave up their rights to bring any further litigation against the company. However, when a wealthy white property owner who lived adjacent to Rollins sued the company for the death of his cattle after water spilled onto his pasture, he received $500,000. I'm sorry we killed your grandma and you're black. Here's $500. Oh, I'm so sorry, rich white landowner. Take all of our money. Ooh, that makes me mad. Hypocrites. After residents contacted the LDEQ about illness such as skin rashes, irritation of the eye, and breathing problems, the pungent owners, the LDEQ, found that Rollins was dumping in the landfill 8 substances for which it had no permit. Cyanide was also found in every sample taken at the Rollins facility. Hazardous waste is big business for Rollins. The company generates more than $69 million annually from this enterprise. When Rollins applied for a permit to burn PCBs at the Olson incinerator during the mid-1980s, opposition grew, and national groups such as Greenpeace and the Sierra Club joined residents in their fight. Opponents succeeded in preventing Rollins from burning PCBs at the facility. Rollins down the river. Ooh, I gotta plug in my phone. Give me 1 minute. Let's see. I hope this works. Sorry. I need to put something. Let's try that. Let's see if that'll work. No. Oh no. Oh no. Okay. Well, I just messed all this up. Okay, I'm going to try and hurry. Rollins down the river. In 1984, Rollins began operating a PCB disposal facility in Union, Louisiana, in St. James Parish. The facility was located about a quarter mile from the Romeville Elementary School. Obsolete electrical transformers, weighing as much as several thousand pounds, were brought to the facility by rail or truck. The PCB-laced fluids were drained from the transformers, which were then rinsed with diesel fuel. The spent PCB and diesel fuel were placed in containers and shipped to a Rollins incinerator in Texas, while the transformers were sent to a landfill in Nevada. The first shipment of transformers arrived at Rollins Union facility in November 1984. The next month, St. James Parish Council passed an ordinance to regulate hazardous wastes and PCBs in parish. The ordinance prohibited the treatment, storage, and disposal of PCBs at commercial waste disposal facilities in the parish. The ordinance also stated that anyone transporting PCBs through the parish had to supply a manifest to or obtain a permit from the sheriff's department of the parish. Rollins filed suit on December 21st, challenging the St. James ordinance on the grounds that it violated the Commerce Clause. On January 2nd, 1985, the St. James Parish Council repealed the ordinance and replaced it with another one that prohibited any business using commercial solvents from being conducted within 1 mile of any area of special concern: school, daycare center, nursing home, grain elevator, public building, auditorium, hospital, church, or theater. Kept it from being located in any area of special environmental concern: flood area, floodplain, wetland, surface or subsurface drinking water source. The new ordinance also prohibited such businesses from draining or discharging any spent solvents into any area of special environmental concern, and specified that such business had to conduct their cleaning operations in a contained area, e.g. on a concrete slab at least 2 feet thick and sloped to collect spills. Rollins immediately challenged the new ordinance too. Though the district court felt that the ordinance amounted to and had the practical effort of an absolute prohibition of Rollins' activities in the parish, the court dismissed Rollins' case because it lacked subject matter jurisdiction. Rollins appealed, and in 1985, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the company. Using the Warren County decision as precedence, the Fifth Circuit Court argued that St. James Parish ordinance was subject to the Supremacy Clause. That is, the Toxic Substances Control Act, TSCA, had supremacy over state and local waste disposal ordinance. Though states and local jurisdiction can develop more stringent criteria governing the handling and disposal of hazardous wastes, such criteria are allowed only in very prescribed circumstances and cannot interfere with interstate commerce or discriminate against particular businesses. The Fifth Circuit Court went on to call the St. James Parish Ordinance a sham that would amount to an outright prohibition of Rawlins PCB disposal activities or an unreasonably burdensome or restrictive regulation of the company's business. The Circuit Court also argued that though a hazardous facility appears to have been located almost deliberately in the most inauspicious possible site, 1/4 mile from the local elementary school, if every locality were able to dodge responsibility for and participation in this program, TSCA, through artificially designed ordinance, the national goal of safe I'm sorry, I was trying to read fast. If every locality were able to dodge responsibility for and participation in this program through artfully designed ordinance, the national goal of safe, environmentally sound toxic waste disposal would surely be frustrated. Diamond, narco and the shell game. Originally a sugar plantation, Diamond morphed into a small black community that was a segregated subdivision of Norco. NORCO. The Diamond Enclave consisted of four block-long streets on which black families owned and occupied their property. Many of the Diamond residents have roots in the community that extend back to the times when their ancestors slaved away on the Trepananger plantation, Trepagnier. The plantation was a land grant issued to the Canadian immigrant Pierre Trepananger, who settled in the area in the 1740s. There were 16 such land grants in St. James Parish. Trepananger eventually became the Diamond Plantation, and the name changed to Belltown, and finally to the Diamond subdivision of Norco. The plantation owners abandoned the property after the Civil War, but the former slaves remained. Some continued living in their slave quarters, while others took occupancy of the Grand Cypress main house perched on the banks of the Mississippi River. The dominance of petrochemicals is very evident in this small settlement of Norco. Norco is short for New Orleans Refining Company. Though Norco is a predominantly white residential section, Diamond is somewhat isolated from the rest of the town and is shoehorned between the sprawling Shell Motiva refinery and the Shell chemical plant. Diamond is separated from the rest of Norco by a densely wooded buffer strip known as the Gaspard Line. Norco, which has about 3,300 residents, is 98% white, while Diamond has only black residents. In 1911, the New Orleans Refining Company, Norco, a proxy company for the Royal Dutch Shell Group, purchased 366-acre Good Hope plantation for $2,100 and built its facility on it. The Marine Petroleum Terminal was constructed adjacent to Belltown. Norco built its first refinery near Diamond in 1916. 4 years later, Shell began to process Mexican crude oil into asphalt at the plant. Shell purchased the facility in 1929. The company wanted to acquire more land to expand its production to include the manufacture of chemicals. Hence, in 1953, Shell bought a property in Belltown for a total of $109,000 to build Shell Chemical. The complex produces ethylene and propylene, building blocks of plastic, and methyl ethyl ketone, a solvent used in paints and medicines. The black residents of Belltown were sharecroppers and farmers who had lived and worked on the land for a long time. Some did not have title to the land. Other families were paid about $90 for their property, while others who lived in the big store, the plantation central building, received a pittance. Black families were essentially evicted or displaced to make way for industrial expansion. Those who could afford it purchased lots in the Diamond subdivision. Blacks thought they would be hired at Shell plants, but few were among the 1,400 workers at the plant, and those who were hired were regulated to menial jobs. It is estimated that only about 3% of Diamond's residents were hired at the plant, yet Diamond is literally on the fence line of the Shell complex, and as the company expanded its operations, still it was across the street from residents' homes. Not surprisingly, Diamond residents live in fear of explosions from factories that dominate the landscape around them. They have a good reason to be weary of the periodic explosions at the complexes. In 1973, an explosion killed Helen Washington and 16-year-old Leroy Jones, who was cutting Washington's grass when a ruptured pipeline released a plume of gas that ignited, engulfing Washington and Jones in flames. The Washington family sold the lot of Shell for $3,000 after the explosion, and Leroy Jones' mother received $500 in compensation. In 1988, 7 shell workers were killed, and another 48 workers and residents were injured in an early morning explosion that destroyed some homes in Diamond and released about 159 million pounds of chemical waste into the air. Shell admitted to paying $200 million to resolve the roughly 17,000 claims arising from the 1988 accident. Why did residents not move? Diamond residents wanted to move, but without equitable compensation for their property, they would not have had enough money to relocate. Realizing that their homes had lost virtually all their equity, a group of women began organizing in the 1970s to get Shell to purchase their homes. In 1990, residents organized a group of concerned citizens of Norco and began to picket Shell to force it to negotiate a buyout of the community. The Louisiana Bucket Brigade began working with Norco residents to teach them how to collect air samples with EPA-approved buckets in 1999. Other regional and national environmental groups such as Greenpeace, Earth Justice Legal Defense Fund, and Refinery Reform Campaign, and the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, Commonweal Environmental Health Fund, Coming Clean Campaign, and the Louisiana Environmental Action Network also collaborated with Diamond residents. The concerned citizens of Norco also got help from Wilma Serba, the Serba company, who helped with the analysis of samples taken from Diamond. While Diamond residents wanted Shell to purchase all their homes in the tract, Shell preferred to deal with each homeowner individually. During the time residents were campaigning to get community buyout, Shell was acquiring individual lots in Diamond. From the 1970s onward, Shell paid an average of $26,000 for the Diamond lots it purchased. In 2001, Shell was offering a minimum of $50,000 to purchase a home. Around the time, 3-bedroom homes a block away from Diamond were selling for $110,000. Eventually, Shell purchased 48 of the 269 lots in Diamond through individual sales. 250 Diamond residents brought suit against Shell, arguing the facility was a nuisance that harmed their health, lowered their property values, and caused them to fear for their safety. The case went to trial in 1997, at which time Shell had pharmacology and toxicology experts testify on its behalf that the plant posed no health risks. One of Shell's lawyers argued, "We all live in a society that has to tolerate certain inconveniences." Addressing the jury for the closing argument, the lawyer continued, "Before you show them the money, they must show you the proof." The jury voted 10-2 against the Diamond residents. Margie Richards, school teacher and leader of the concerned citizens of Norco, went all the way to the United Nations Human Rights Commission in Geneva in 1999 to plead the residents' case. Richard also went to the Hague, Hague, I know, I have no idea. The Hague, Shell's international headquarters, to speak with officials about Diamond. Shell, a corporate behemoth, with annual gross sales exceeding $175 billion, finally agreed to a buyout of the Diamond community in June 2002. Shell's website indicates that the Norco refinery covers 1,000 lots. The company has a payroll of $50 million and pays more than $16 million in state and local taxes. Shell claims it pays $6 million in property taxes that fund local schools, police, and fire departments. The company also claims that in 2005 it infused the local economy with more than $26 million through its purchase of goods and services. Shell compensated the Diamond residents who owned homes $800,000 minimum, or the market value of their homes. Residents who lived in trailers were offered $50,000 minimum, or the market value of their trailer. For anyone wishing to stay in Diamond, Shell offered you a $25,000 home improvement loan that was forgivable after 5 years. Shell did not agree to pay for the health insurance or medical bills of residents. Some residents, such as Margie Richardson's mother, were able to sell their homes to Shell. Richard's mother sold her for $114,000, and Richard herself sold her trailer to the company for $61,000. Shell spent about $30 million to purchase and then demolish 250 homes in Diamond. Wallace residence opposite of Formosa. In 1988, the Gulf Coast Tenants Association and Greenpeace organized a march through the communities of Cancer Alley to raise awareness of environmental concerns in the region. In 1992, a tiny settlement of Wallace, a town of about 750 people, 98% whom were black, fought a 2-year battle with Formosa, a company with a history of environmental violations in Texas, Delaware, and Louisiana. Before the company decided it would not build a $700 million facility that would have been the world's largest rayon and pulp processing plant. The parish rezoned 1,800 acres of residential and agricultural land to industrial use, and the state and parish promised Formosa about $400 million in tax breaks if it would build the Wallace facility. Covenant and Shintech. The most famous 3 cases occurred in Convent, C-O-N-V-N-T, Convent. Both Wallace and Convent are in St. James Parish. The parish, which has a population of 2,100 people in 2000, is 49.4% black and straddles the Mississippi River. St. James Parish has 12 petrochemical complexes. In 1996, Shintech announced plans to build a $700 million chloroalkyl vinyl complex, which would consist of 3 chemical plants and an incinerator that would produce 1.1 billion pounds of polyvinyl chloride annually. The plant was expected to emit 611,000 pounds or 611,000 pounds of contaminants into the air. Shintech was promised on almost $130 million in subsidies, including a 10-year property tax exemption worth about $95.4 million. Okay, Shintech was promised almost $130 million in subsidies, including 10-year property tax exemption worth about $95. That's bullshit. The town of Convent is 82% black, and 40% of the residents live below the poverty level. An elementary school was located 1.5 miles away from the proposed facility. In 1997, residents of the community filed a complaint with the EPA objecting to the 3 permits that the LDEQ issued to Shintech. Opponents of the planned facility alleged that the permits violated the Clean Air Act, Executive Order Act of Clean Air Act, Executive Order Act 12898, and Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The EPA rejected some of the arguments in the petition regarding the Clean Air Act, but agreed to an expedited review of the complaint concerning certain technical violations of the Clean Air Act. The EPA also urged the LDEQ to resolve potential environmental justice issues that arose because the permits were issued. In September 1997, the EPA rejected the state-issued air permits for Shintech on the grounds that the permits failed to regulate all potential sources of pollution, and that its review process had found 49 technical problems with the air permits that had to be resolved before the project could proceed. The battle between Shintech and Convent garnered international attention. Finally, in 1998, Shintech decided to forego plans to build in Convent and to build a smaller plant in Plaquemine, a small, heavily industrialized town also located in Cancer Alley. Corporate lobbying, tax breaks, and incentives. Since the late 1970s, communities in Cancer Alley have been trying to limit the number of noxious facilities sited in their neighborhoods. While activists have generally organized to prevent a facility from sitting in a particular location or to monitor the operations of a facility, the parishes and the state have had much more ambiguous relationship with businesses. On the one hand, parishes have welcomed industries by offering tax exemptions and other incentives. On the other, they try to regulate the industries post-HOC. Regulating the industries becomes particularly tricky if those industries generate income for the local and state governments. For instance, in 2002, industries operating in Cancer Alley generated 6,200,000 jobs and $1.14 billion in state taxes. Louisiana has roughly 11% of the country's petroleum reserves, and the state is the second largest producer of refined oil in the United States. Consequently, the petrochemical industry is both an important driver of the state's economy and a powerful lobby in the legislature. Hence, it is no coincidence that one of the most influential groups in the state is the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. The group recruits, trains, endorses, and supports political candidates who promote the association's interest. The Louisiana Chemical Association is another powerful industry lobbying group. Both of these associations coordinate their efforts at times. Louisiana entices companies to establish facilities in the state by offering generous tax incentives through programs such as Industrial Property Tax Exemption Program, which has been in effect since 1936. The Louisiana Economic Development website describes the program as offering an attractive tax incentive for manufacturers. In 2012, that is, the manufacturing companies do not pay any local property taxes on the construction or renovation of buildings, machinery, equipment, improvements to the land, new investments, or annual capitalization or annual capitalized additions at the manufacturing site for up to 10 years. Stop it, ladies. After this initial period, corporate taxes are reduced. Consequently, the amount of corporate tax relief in this stage is staggering. Between 1988 and 1998, for instance, the state granted $2.5 billion in tax exemptions to corporations. Mississippi has a similar industrial property tax exemption program. Thus, while most of this book is concerned with why communities do not move away from hazardous sites, it is clear on why many corporations want to move in. I am so sorry that I had to read that super fast. My battery was dying and it was going to get super crazy. So, good thing this video, it's going to be on my website and right where you need it to. So if you need to go back and look at it, that's fine. If you would like to go get the book so that you don't have to rely on me reading it to you because I sound like Jed Clampett and I talk fast. It's Toxic Communities by Dorceta E. Taylor, and I'm sure that it's at your local library, or you can order it offline. And if I end up reading it to you, I'm sure that there's some way that you can go find a donation page for the author and give her a nice little thank you for spending all this hard time researching this topic. Anyway, so chapter 1 is done, and we're going to move on to lesson 3.